Tovah, Happy New Year. Welcome to this unusual but special celebration of Rosh Hashanah 5781. I want to begin by thanking our board, our leadership, for navigating our congregation through these very difficult times. I want to also thank Anne-Marie Fisher, our executive director, who has pretty much single-handedly been managing the affairs of the temple since it all started, ably as she always does. And I want to thank Ezra Donner, our music director, for the beautiful arrangements that we'll hear tonight. I want to welcome a sister congregation through the Society for Humanistic Judaism that's joining us tonight, along with many others, Kol Haskalah in North Carolina. Welcome. A representative of that congregation will participate in our program in just a bit. If you've ever considered joining our congregation, now is the time. Our new membership model eliminates all of the obstacles and barriers to joining. Now, members determine their own level of contribution in support of their membership. And if you've ever thought about giving your children a Jewish education, please know that with our new membership model, participation in our Spinoza Youth Education Program is a benefit of membership, no tuition. Now, this year, of course, Spinoza will be in a different mode due to the pandemic, offering only monthly holiday online programming. But we do expect to be together next year. We hope you will tell your friends and loved ones, your neighbors and families, about our Spinoza Youth Education and about our new approach to membership. Since we last met to celebrate Rosh Hashanah in this building, where I am and you are not, we and our entire planet have been through so much. But here at home, at BT, we've remained strong as a community. We have stayed united as we've addressed this crisis the only way that we know how, through science and with applied compassion, distancing physically but remaining socially close in our hearts. Rosh Hashanah is a time to consider our values, to think about the people we want to be. It begins a 10-day period of self-examination that culminates with Yom Kippur. Our society needs now more than ever to engage in self-examination. This crisis has laid bare all of our weaknesses, and they are many. When we get to the other side of this, hopefully sometime in the Jewish year of 5781 that we're welcoming now, self-examination is exactly what we'll need to rebuild a better, stronger, more compassionate society. Let us meet the coming challenges with courage and with a recommitment to our values, remembering, as I'll talk about on Yom Kippur, that hope means nothing if it does not emerge from our hearts and become part of our actions. Rosh Hashanah is the time when, for thousands of years, Jews have thought about their actions. On this holiday, we enter that process again, making plans for what can be a better year ahead. Before we get started with our celebration, we will take 3 more minutes of your time to hear greetings from Paul Caradonna, our congregation's president, and from former BT president Charlie Paul, who will speak briefly about the Adam Society planned giving. Then it's on to Hevenu Shalom Aleichem and the rest of our program.
Hello and greetings. I'm Paul Caradonna, Board of Trustees President for the Birmingham Temple Congregation for Humanistic Judaism. I'd like to welcome all of you to our community as we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. Although the past year has seen the world endure an unprecedented and challenging moment in history, we at the Congregation for Humanistic Judaism stand resolute in our commitment to share our philosophy of compassion, humanity, and reason, while living up to our values of building a just and peaceful world. Through our community outreach, civic engagement, Spinoza Youth Education Program, adult enrichment programs, and cultural events, we endeavor to provide a space where people can express their Jewish identity and experience Jewish culture in an enlightened and welcoming setting. Despite the trying times we are faced with, our volunteers, staff, and particularly our Rabbi, Jeffrey Falick, have worked tirelessly to continue these programs and deliver the message of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. As we celebrate the new year, I invite all of you to join our community. If you enjoy the programs we provide and share our philosophy, I encourage you to become a member. The links are provided below, and all are welcome. No matter what the new year brings, I am certain that our ideals will persevere. Stay healthy, stay safe. Shana Tovah, Happy New Year.
L'Shana Tovah. I'm Charlie Paul. Suzanne and I have been members of the Birmingham Temple Congregation for Humanistic Judaism for over 40 years. Perhaps you've seen us around. I'm asking you today to join us, as well as a number of other members of our community, in the Adam Society. The Adam Society is our congregation's program where you can create a vital financial legacy in your estate planning that helps ensure the future of our temple. I'm not asking you to write a check or transfer funds today. There are many different ways for you to include the temple in your end-of-life instructions. There's no minimum gift required for membership in the Adam Society. An attorney and a professional estate planner, both good friends of our congregation, are available for private, no-cost initial consultations should you need help in getting started. Plenty of information is available online. From the weekly newsletter, you can click on this donations and payments link, or you can click here on the temple's website. I hope you consider helping our congregation so we can look forward to a strong, sound future for all our children and grandchildren. Thank you. Suzanne and I wish all of our members and friends a happy and especially now a healthy New Year.
We have come together to welcome the new year, to celebrate its promise.
To ponder our responsibilities.
New beginnings bring new opportunities for new and deeper relationships.
For the larger visions they present.
Let us preserve joyous and worthy memories, and let us carry forward our noblest hopes.
To enrich and uplift in the year which now begins.
Let us learn from experience the lessons of the Jewish past and the lessons of the human story.
Remaining aware of the newer challenges before us.
Let us greet the new year with renewed strength and hope, responding to the mystery and glory of life, setting forth with confidence in our abilities.
To make the plans and perform the deeds to help make this truly HASHANAH Tovah.
May we bless ourselves with a good and sweet year.
Happy New Year.
Tovah.
Hinema With the onset of this Rosh Hashanah, unified with Jews of every place and time, we proclaim a new year of hope.
May these holiday lights inspire us to reflect upon the light in our lives and the warmth we find in the company of loved ones and community.
Now is the time for turning.
The leaves are beginning to turn from green to red and orange.
The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more towards the south.
The animals are beginning to turn, storing their food for the winter.
For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively. But for us, turning does not come so simply.
It takes an act of will for us to make a turn.
It means breaking with old habits. It means admitting that we've been wrong. And this is never easy.
It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful.
It means saying, I'm sorry.
It means admitting that we have the ability to change, and this is a difficult thing to do.
These things are terribly hard to do, but unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways.
Let us return.
From callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love,
From pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment.
from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith.
Let us turn around, let us face ourselves.
Let us face each other.
For in isolation there is no life, but in community and companionship there is love and joy and forgiveness.
Rosh Hashanah, we sit in judgment of ourselves. Before the tribunal of reason and honesty, the roster of our deeds stands exposed. The reality of our daily lives meets the sharp scrutiny of our ideals. We want to be so much more than we are. We want to be wiser, kinder, and more confident in the act of living. We want to seize the world energetically and turn it into some urgent purpose. The valley of dullness in which we wander threaten the meaningfulness of our lives, and we ache to ascend to the peaks of excitement. Time passes far too quickly, and the boredom of routine is the terrifying symptom of wasted opportunity. We half live and fear the future. Each of us is capable of an unimagined greatness. Each of us is a treasure house of vital potential. Yet, we allow hesitation and anxiety to inhibit the expression of our being. Past failure and present fear restrict our range of feeling and thinking. While this day of meditation awakens us to the truth of who we are, it must also quicken within us the reality of what we can be.
ובחודש השביעי באחד לחודש, מקרא קודש יהיה לכם, כל מלאכת עבודה לא תעשו, יום תרועה יהיה לכם. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, there shall be an assembly, a cessation from work, a day for sounding the shofar.
Shana Tovah. For untold generations at this time, our ancestors listened to the sound of the shofar. What did they hear in its piercing tones? What solemn truths did they detect in its calls, which stirred them so profoundly each year? And what does the shofar say to us today as we stand at the dawn of the new year, groping for wisdom and beliefs to sustain us? Tekiah, awake. Let not habit dull your minds, nor comfort harden your hearts. Examine your deeds, look well into your lives, mend your ways. As we hear the sharp tekiah blast, let us rouse ourselves from smugness and self-satisfaction, from callousness and self-righteousness. Shvarim, the broken refrain. Listen to the staccato cry. Hear the echoes of sighing and weeping. The deprived and the distressed, the neglected and the enslaved, the bruised and the broken, all cry out for relief from their pain, for release from their torment. As we hear the anguished wail of Shavarim, let us open our ears to the cries of the afflicted and the oppressed, and let our hearts respond with compassion and love. Teruah, the call to battle is sounded. Join the struggle against evil and suffering. Give of your bread to those who hunger. Give of your strength to those who stumble. Give of your time to the lonely and forsaken. Heal the wounded. Comfort the bereaved. Let us hearken to the Teruah's call to action. For in our hands, in our hearts, and in our minds are the means for building a better world, for fulfilling the promise of peace and justice, and for hastening a day when these shall prevail throughout the world.
Tekiah, Shavarim, Teruah, Tekiah Gadolah.
Once again, Shana Tovah, Happy New Year. We come together, or at least as together as we can possibly be right now, at a time of crisis and great uncertainty. It is unclear when and how we will emerge from this, but there is no question that there will be damage. Much of this will touch the Jewish world. This pandemic has been no less than devastating to the American Jewish community. Dr. Stephen Windmuller, an expert in American Jewish affairs at the Hebrew Union College, has warned that American Jewry is facing a financial and structural crisis. The economic impact of the pandemic will be devastating to the American Jewish communal system. He writes about concerns for the economic viability of synagogues, schools, camps, and Jewish social services as pressures on our institutions mount and conditions continue to deteriorate. Like others in Jewish communal leadership, he notes that there will be mammoth efforts to save the foundations of our community, efforts that may result in profound changes to our Jewish world, far-reaching transformations, he says, that may very well include a number of institutional mergers and the realignment of organizational missions. I believe that he is right. And if any proposed changes are to succeed, I also believe that they must address long-standing systemic issues in our community, issues that have contributed for decades to the increased alienation and disengagement of American Jewry. As a result of promoting values and visions of Judaism and Jewish identity that are, at best, irrelevant to most American Jews, and at worst, contradict the actual lived values of the people whom they seek to serve and engage. Every crisis is also an opportunity. As someone who cares deeply about preserving Jewish community at its best, I would like to offer some thoughts about how, in this coming transformation, in this expected period of rebuilding, American Jewish leadership might want to take a serious look at our values, our humanistic Jewish values, held, I believe, by majorities of American Jews as they begin these processes. If there is any hope for the American Jewish community to rise above the damage taking place and to thrive for future generations, any transformation of our community must begin by acknowledging and appreciating who American Jews really are. Think about the folks that you know, the Jewish people who belong to other synagogues or organizations, those who are unaffiliated completely with the Jewish community. What do they care about? What are their priorities? For starters, they are not overwhelmingly religious. Polls indicate that the vast majority of American Jews believe that being Jewish is much more a matter of culture and ancestry than it is of religious belief. And when they are asked what specifically is the most important content of a Jewish life, large majorities say that it means being ethical and moral people, working for justice and equality for everyone, being intellectually open-minded and curious, driven by facts. I don't know about you, but when I hear these values promoted to the top of most Jews' priorities, I hear very clear reverberations of humanism. Now, I should also be clear, I'm not talking strictly about our kind of humanism, the variety that parts ways with concepts of God, what we call non-theistic humanism. What I am talking about is a broader kind of humanism, one that is characterized by an appreciation of science and open debate, by universalistic concerns and considerations for others, particularly for those who have been disadvantaged, marginalized, and by the capacity for people to make ethical and moral decisions for themselves and their families that are grounded in a commitment to human dignity and thriving, rather than on the basis of nostalgic irrelevancies like religious teachings, authority, revelation, or tradition. Of course, the leadership of any religious community is always going to have different priorities than the lay people. As such, most rabbis, perhaps not humanistic rabbis, but most rabbis and other Jewish leaders will always want to encourage more Shabbat, more holiday observance, more ritual involvement, so forth. But just as we've seen in other religiously oriented communities, it is the big things that count. Like when American Catholics start agitating for the freedom to divorce or to employ birth control, or when American Jews start demanding the right to marry whomever they choose. It was with that, namely the issue of intermarriage, that emerged in American Jewish life some 40 years ago, where so much of the dissonance between American Jewish leaders and members of our community began. Before the 1970s, intermarriage was not a major issue on the American Jewish agenda. There simply was not that much of it with which to be concerned. But by the 1980s, it was already clear that this was changing. And it was in 1992 that an important survey of American Jews was published, revealing that the intermarriage rate among them had crossed 50%. Almost immediately, those of us who were working in the Jewish world could feel the panic settling in, panic that inspired fever dreams of Jewish disappearance. As a result, the organized Jewish world responded, and this is no exaggeration, by flooding billions with a B, of dollars into efforts to reverse that statistic, building much of their response on the idea that what was needed to address the so-called crisis was to encourage more group loyalty. This was an ill-advised and reactionary strategy. The last thing that Jews who were falling in love with people wanted to hear is that they were doing so because they were insufficiently tribalistic. As a campus Hillel director at the beginning of my career, I found myself in the epicenter of the intermarriage panic of the 1990s. As I set out to work on campus, my marching orders were clear and clearly tribalistic. I was to bring Jews together with other Jews in order to encourage more Jews to marry each other. Very few people remember or even believe me anymore when I tell them that birthright Israel was actually established with this purpose and very little having to do with Israel and Zionism. The students on those trips understood. They called it birth rate Israel. In their misguided attempts to staunch the rate of intermarriage, and with a variety of options available to them, including, spoiler alert, the ones that were suggested by our movement, most Jewish institutions nevertheless doubled down on Jewish loyalty to encourage what they revealingly called in-marriage. Take the Reform movement, the largest liberal denomination of world Jewry, as an example. Their rabbis were not beholden to Jewish law, and in fact, they had always been permitted to perform intermarriage wedding ceremonies, yet it was only a small minority of Reform rabbis who had ever done so. In the 1980s, as they faced increasing employment pressure to do so, they responded by forging mutual pledge drives, promising each other that they would not do it if they didn't want to, and crafting policies that actually forbade congregations that were seeking rabbis from even asking the rabbis their position on the issue. Ultimately, of course, the Reform rabbinate did surrender to the growing demand for them to bless intermarriages. And some, and perhaps now even more, began to conduct these wedding ceremonies, but not without conditions. Even as they responded to this demand, there was still no reconsideration of the commitments and values that had led them to their refusal in the first place. In fact, when they finally admitted defeat, they made it very clear that it was not due to the embrace of a more humanistic, if you will, humane, or tolerant attitude on their part. Instead, the decision to officiate was actually framed as a rejection of the premise of intermarriage. Listen to their official statement. Those rabbis who officiate at mixed marriages do so out of the hope that officiation will encourage the non-Jewish spouse to help build a Jewish home, to help raise Jewish children, and to one day make the choice to become a Jew. And they added, although we do not use terms like prohibition and sin to describe mixed marriages, and although we welcome mixed married households into our community, we do not, they said, we do not condone mixed marriage itself. To this day, and despite all of their outreach, Reform temples do not permit either ritual access or entry into most synagogue leadership positions for non-Jewish members of their congregations. Nor can an intermarried Jew study to become a rabbi at their seminary. As for conservative rabbis, well, they're not permitted to perform intermarriage wedding ceremonies at all. And it's been less than 2 years since they were given permission to attend one as a guest. How does this jibe with the values of the people they want to serve when for decades now, in reliable surveys, majorities of Jews have stated that they consider it racist to oppose Jewish-Gentile marriages? What a shame that they did not respond to the wonderful and broadly humanistic values of those whose interests they were seeking to capture. If they had spoken to a real humanistic rabbi, if they had consulted Rabbi Wein, they might have heard something along the lines of what he wrote in the early 1980s. Something needs to be done, Rabbi Wein said, in order to provide in the Jewish community a realistic, dignified, effective, and compassionate approach to this development. We as humanistic Jews, because of our beliefs and commitments, may be able to provide this alternative. We can declare that love, personal compatibility, and individual freedom are morally more important than group identity. I want to emphasize this. Morally more important than loyalty or tribalism because of our beliefs and commitments. He did not speak of fear. He invoked no crisis. He talked about our values. Values that, without reference to beliefs in God, we so obviously share with majorities of American Jews. Their rabbi's devotion to group loyalty tribalism, which they dress up like Tevye and sing in the key of tradition, is simply irrelevant to most American Jews, even offensive. The word they used in the survey, racist. Such attitudes simply cannot provide the basis for a post-pandemic transformation of the American Jewish community. While intermarriage continues to divide so many Jews from the teachings of their rabbis and other leaders, the issue does not stand alone. As it continues to simmer, some quarters of our leadership have found new and novel ways to reject the broadly held humanism of American Jews, new paths to reject these deeply held values, even their commitment to tikkun olam. You do not need to adjust your iPad or other devices. You heard me correctly. In point of fact, it was only 4 short years ago on this very holiday that one conservative rabbi from here in Southeast Michigan, Aaron Starr of Shaarei Tzedek, delivered a sermon that he called Time to Say Kaddish for Tikkun Olam. If it was meant to be provocative, and I assume it was, it certainly worked. The central assertion of Rabbi Starr's sermon which was, by the way, widely circulated and even applauded throughout the entire Jewish world, was that too many Jews have become over-concerned about universal issues of social justice, and that this has come at the expense of standing up for ourselves. That, in his words, trying to shoulder the burden for all of the world's problems is not keeping Judaism alive, it is killing it. About one thing, Rabbi Starr was correct. Tikkun olam, the phrase we use today urging us to repair the world, that's the translation, through the universal application of social justice and equity, really is a more modern repositioning of an older Jewish idea whose origins really didn't have much to do with justice or equality. A generous portion of his sermon was dedicated to demonstrating how two social justice-oriented rabbis in particular, heroes of mine, Arthur Waskow and Jerry Serrata, had, as he interpreted it, appropriated the ancient, truly barely related term tikkun olam in order to create a new Jewish commandment. And that, Starr says, has had the adverse result of turning our community away from its own particularistic needs toward a less Jewishly concerned universalism. To, as Starr put it, downplay Jewish particularism in order to effect more global change. This undermining of Jewish particularism, as he called it, this turning of our attention toward a universalistic commitment to tikkun olam, consequently set in motion a process wherein, as Starr called it, perhaps it is tikkun olam itself that is destroying the Jewish community. It would be unfair of me not to point out that Rabbi Starr also urged Jews to build bridges, assist the poor of the entire world, respond to the evils of racism. But he also spent some time decrying the reality that the state of Israel no longer stands at the very center of every Jew's identity. And he spent a fair portion of his address chastising two Jewish millennials who had just authored a piece for the Jewish Forward called "Don't Like Black Lives Matter? Get Ready to Lose Young Jews Like Us." Why? Because 5 years ago, an addendum to one statement by one group supporting BLM included some extreme language about Israel. Rabbi Starr's position was clear. Mine, he said, is the voice of the Holocaust survivor, the voice that screams out, "Protect Israel at all costs," and is the same one that sees an existential threat against Israel and against the Jewish people wherever I turn. That voice, he said, my voice, is the one that wants to shout out, "Jewish family comes first." I respect Rabbi Starr and appreciate the straightforward and candid nature of his remarks. Nevertheless, as we begin to face the transformations of the American Jewish community that lie ahead, I want to warn him and others in Jewish leadership positions and positions of power and influence in the American Jewish community that these kinds of ethnocentric and tribalistic statements simply cannot provide the basis for a post-pandemic reconstruction. These are not the messages that Jews need or want to hear. These are not the values that resonate with the deepest parts of their humanity or of their Jewishness. In those same surveys of American Jews where they identified open-mindedness and a commitment to social justice and equality as centerpieces of their own Jewish identities, an equally large number of American Jews also revealed that for them, remembering the Holocaust is a focal point of Jewish identity. And yet, though they may share this with Rabbi Starr, their takeaways are very different. He learns only from the Holocaust that Jews must see existential threats everywhere. Why then, if not out of fear, do these Jews place the memory of the Holocaust so high on their Jewish identity agenda? Perhaps it is because of how it helps them understand that a society strangled by inequality, social injustice, racism, and tribalism is what made the Holocaust possible. How memory of it awakens in them an embrace of love, of equality, of universal justice, of fairness. When their Jewish leaders diminish these matters of central importance to their lives and their worldviews, when they deliver sermons calling for more Jewish exclusivity, calling on Jews to say Kaddish for tikkun olam, what most Jews hear are accusations that they are insufficiently loyal. When Jewish leaders malign our young people as they march for Black lives because of something having to do with Israel, what most Jews hear is a rejection of deeply held moral values in the name of Jewish loyalty. This is exactly what most Jews have been hearing when their rabbis speak about intermarriage. when they continue to inform intermarrying Jews that when the rabbi shows up for their wedding, it is not to rejoice in the love of two people, but to encourage the non-Jewish spouse to help build a Jewish home, to help raise Jewish children, and to one day make the choice to become a Jew. In other words, to increase Jewish loyalty. These tribalistic concerns that occupy our community's agenda, asking Jews to value particularism over universalistic concerns, to interpret the historical Jewish experience as an argument for shutting ourselves off from the world rather than opening ourselves up to it, will not be a successful formula for the transformation of American Jewry. Rabbi Wein taught us that Jewish survival is not the highest value. It's a value, but not the highest value, which, as he said, other ideals must remain subordinate to. For decades now, the majority of Jews, irrespective of ideas of God, have embraced this kind of humanism. They are keenly open-minded. They are deeply committed to the universal pursuit of justice and fairness and equality, and they view this pursuit as a central lesson of the Jewish experience. They trust in their own power to make ethical and moral decisions about how to navigate the world, whom to love, and they do not view their choices as betrayals of their Jewish identity or commitments. Our movement, Humanistic Judaism, is by no means the main driver of Jewish life. But our movement is today the only one that embraces all of these core beliefs of the modern American Jew. And so, to those seeking a blueprint for the metamorphosis of Jewish life beyond this crisis, I urge them to better learn and understand the deeply held commitments of millions of American Jews, to listen to what we've been saying and watch what we've been doing, even if they want to ignore, as is their right, our conclusions about God. By doing such, they may reconsider their mergers, realignments, and restatements of mission, leaving behind fears for Jewish survival and attitudes about Jewish loyalty to create a better, stronger Jewish community that reflects the beautiful and deeply held commitments, I would venture to say, the new humanism of today's Jews. Thank you.
The last word has not been spoken. The last sentence has not been written. The final verdict is not in. It is never too late to change my mind, my direction, to say no to the past and yes to the future, to offer remorse, to ask and give forgiveness. It is never too late to start over again, to feel again, to love again, to hope again. It is never too late to overcome despair, to turn sorrow into resolve, and pain into purpose. It is never too late to alter my world, not by magic incantations or manipulation of the cards or deciphering the stars, but by opening myself to curative forces buried within, to hidden energies, the powers in my interior self. In sickness and in dying, it is never too late. Living I teach, dying I teach, how I face pain and fear. Others observe me, children, adults, students of life and death, learning from my bearing, my posture, my philosophy.
We rise up each morning, and the earth rises too. World weary, we rise up, and we want something new. A world where compassion falls freely as rain. A world where all people can live without pain. Inclusive of all and rejecting of none. Where love touches all lives like the warmth of the sun. No abuse and no hatred, no prisons of fear. As the sound of the shofar celebrates the new year. If we open our hearts to the love waiting there, we can have the power to heal our despair. If we open our eyes and see all people are kin, destruction will end and a new world If we open our hearts, if we open our eyes, if we open our eyes.
In the twilight of the vanishing year, our hearts are filled with a sense of gratitude. We are stirred by the memory of joy as the new year begins. We were sustained by love and kindness, comforted in times of sorrow, found happiness in our homes, and gladness with our friends.
As the new year begins, we join in happy song.
But there were dreams that came to naught, and times when we refused to dream. These too we now remember as the new year begins.
As the new year begins, contrition fills our thoughts. Some of our days were dark with grief. Many a tear furrowed our cheeks. Alas, for the tender ties that were broken. We look back with sorrow as the new year begins.
As the new year begins, tears well up within us.
Yet we look ahead with hope, grateful for this time of renewal, for the possibility of good to come. Let this Rosh Hashanah celebration of life be our day of renewal into life and peace, serenity and safety as the new year begins.
As the new year begins, so is hope reborn in us.
Hello and HASHANAH Tovah. My name is Lacey Schofield and I'm the membership coordinator of Kol Haskalah. On behalf of our congregation, I want to thank Birmingham Temple for welcoming us to participate in your high holiday services. We seek peace, the most precious gift we can bestow upon ourselves. May we find the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. May our country strive to be a stronghold of peace and its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within its borders, health and happiness within its homes. May we strengthen the bonds of friendship among the inhabitants of all lands, and may the love of humanity permeate every home and every heart. May we labor for righteousness, and in so doing, author a new book of life, blessing, and peace. For we alone are the source of peace.
In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
Come
Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We think now of our loved ones whom death took from us during this year that has passed, those who died at this season in the many years that have passed, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own.
We begin this new year with hope in our hearts for
a good and sweet new year, a year of joy and happiness, a year of love and understanding,
a year of peace and friendship, a year of prosperity, a year of health,
a year in which the hope in our hearts is made real by the deeds of our hands. HASHANAH Tovah. Happy New Year.
That's our Rosh Hashanah program for this year. While we look forward to being together next year in person, I hope that you found the program uplifting and meaningful. Thank you to everyone who participated. We'll conclude now with a final song as I wish you and yours a Shana Tova Umituka, a sweet and happy and yes, healthy New Year.
Peace be